Emily had always felt like an outsider in her own family. But she never had concrete proof, until last Christmas. It started with what seemed like an innocent text from her mother. Emily, everyone's staying home due to the ice storm. Christmas dinner is cancelled. Stay safe, honey. At 32 years old, Emily had grown used to being treated differently. She was the quiet, responsible daughter, the one who worked hard, always showed up when needed, and never caused trouble. Meanwhile, her younger sister, Jessica, was the family's golden child. Charismatic and carefree, Jessica could do no wrong in their parents' eyes. Emily had spent her life trying to earn the same love and recognition, always hoping that if she just did enough, they would finally see her as an equal. That Christmas morning, she tried not to let the disappointment sink in. She made herself a cup of hot chocolate, curled up on the couch with a blanket, and put on an old holiday movie. It wasn't the first time family plans had mysteriously fallen through. But she had long since learned to accept it without questioning. Then, around 3 p.m., everything changed. As she scrolled through Instagram, her heart stopped. There it was, a fresh post from her cousin Sarah. Perfect family Christmas at Jessica's. So blessed to have everyone together. #family traditions #Christmas dinner. Emily's blood ran cold. She clicked on the post. And the truth hit her like a punch to the gut. The photo showed her entire family, her parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, even her grandmother, gathered around Jessica's beautifully decorated dining table, laughing, wearing festive sweaters, and raising their glasses in a toast. There was no ice storm. There had never been an ice storm. The lie was so obvious that Emily almost felt foolish for believing it in the first place. Through the windows in the background, she could see clear, sunny skies. The roads were dry. There was no reason for them to cancel anything, except to exclude her. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through more photos. Her father carving the turkey. Her mother arranging the same Christmas cookies Emily had helped bake every year. Her little nieces and nephews opening presents. Every single person she loved. All together. Except her. The realization stung more than she had expected. It wasn't just this one event, it was the years of exclusion. The carefully orchestrated lies to keep her at arm's length. How many other times had they forgotten to invite her? Spun excuses about cancelled plans. Or simply omitted her from their family moments? How long had they been doing this? Emily had always brushed off these incidents, telling herself that she was just overthinking things. That her family loved her, just in a quieter way. That maybe she really was just different. But this was intentional. The next morning, her phone rang. Her mother's name lit up on the screen. "Hi honey, hope you had a nice, quiet Christmas. We missed you." Emily stared at her phone, disbelief turning into something sharper, something dangerously close to anger. Her mother sounded so casual, so unbothered, as if she truly believed Emily wouldn't find out. As if she hadn't just been caught in a lie that shattered everything. For the first time in her life, Emily didn't ignore the feeling twisting in her chest. She didn't swallow her pain and pretend it didn't matter. She didn't let it go. Instead, she took a deep breath and asked the question that had been burning in her mind all night. Really? Because Sarah's Instagram post shows everyone had a wonderful time at Jessica's house. Everyone except me. A long silence stretched between them. Emily could almost hear her mother scrambling for an excuse, trying to think of a way to spin this in her favor. "Oh, well, it was all last minute. Sweetheart, we didn't want you to feel obligated to come. You know how you are at gatherings, always so quiet, making things a little tense." Emily clenched her jaw. Tense? We just thought it would be better this way. Jessica wanted everything to be perfect. It wasn't personal. It wasn't personal. The words echoed in Emily's mind. And suddenly, everything was clear. Every last-minute cancelled event. Every spontaneous family gathering she had found out about too late. Every dismissive remark about how she was too busy with work to be involved. It was never a mistake. It was never an accident. It was always intentional. "How many other times have you lied to me?" Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. Her mother hesitated. And that hesitation told Emily everything she needed to know. "Catherine, you're being oversensitive," her mother finally said. "This is exactly why." "Why what?" Emily cut her off. "Why you exclude me? Why you pretend I don't exist unless you need something? Why Jessica gets to be the perfect daughter while I'm treated like an inconvenience?" "That's not fair," her mother protested. "We love you both equally. It's just, Jessica puts in the effort to be part of the family. You're always so busy with work." Emily let out a bitter laugh. "Busy? You mean busy helping pay your mortgage? Busy taking care of Dad after his surgery? That kind of busy?" "Listen," her mother's voice turned stern. "If you're going to be like this, maybe it's best if we give each other some space. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." And just like that, she hung up. Emily sat there, staring at her phone, feeling something inside her shift. For 32 years, she had made excuses for them. For 32 years, she had convinced herself that if she just worked harder, gave more, proved herself, maybe they would finally see her as part of the family. But the truth was simple. She wasn't the problem. She never had been. And for the first time in her life, she stopped trying to earn love that was never freely given. From the moment she was old enough to notice, Emily had always felt like an outsider in her own family. It wasn't that they were outright cruel to her, no. It was much more subtle than that. It was the kind of favoritism that didn't look obvious from the outside but cut deeper with every passing year. Growing up, Emily tried to be the perfect daughter. She studied hard, got straight A's, and never caused trouble. She helped her mother cook, cleaned up after dinner without being asked, and always made sure to be available whenever her parents needed her. Yet, no matter how much she did, it was never enough, because Jessica, her younger sister, was always the one who shined. Jessica was the fun one, the social butterfly who could charm anyone with a smile. She wasn't particularly responsible, nor was she exceptionally talented in school, but she had a way of making people adore her. Their parents doted on her, showering her with attention and praise for even the smallest of accomplishments. Emily, on the other hand, was expected to take care of things, to be the responsible one, the reliable one. She remembered one particular birthday, Jessica's 16th. Their parents had thrown a lavish party, renting out a venue, inviting over 100 guests, and gifting her a brand new car. When Emily had turned 16, she had received a small family dinner and a savings bond with the vague promise of, "This will help you one day." It had been like that her entire life. When Jessica got a C in math, their parents hired a private tutor. When Emily struggled in her advanced chemistry course, they told her to figure it out because you're the smart one. When Jessica quit college to pursue yoga full-time, their parents called her brave and independent. When Emily worked long hours to pay off her student loans, they called her too obsessed with work. She convinced herself that none of it mattered, that as long as she kept doing her best, she would eventually be recognized for her hard work. That if she just tried a little harder, gave a little more, maybe, just maybe, she would finally be seen as an equal to Jessica. But it never happened. 3 years ago, when their father needed surgery, Emily took 3 weeks off work to care for him. She cooked, cleaned, managed his medications, and made sure he was comfortable. Jessica, on the other hand, showed up once, took a few selfies for social media, and left, claiming she had a yoga retreat she simply couldn't miss. Yet, in their parents' retelling of that time, Jessica was the devoted daughter who made time to visit, while Emily was simply doing what was expected. That was the moment she should have realized the truth. The favoritism wasn't unconscious, it was deliberate, but she ignored the signs, excusing their behavior again and again. Even last Thanksgiving, Emily had spent hours in the kitchen helping their mother prepare the meal, only to hear her mother proudly tell the guests that Jessica put so much effort into the cooking this year. Jessica had barely set foot in the kitchen. Still, Emily swallowed her feelings and smiled, because that's what she had been taught to do. Then came last Christmas. When Jessica announced she would be hosting dinner, Emily had eagerly offered to help with the planning, but Jessica had waved her off, saying she wanted everything to be perfect this year. Emily hadn't questioned it, not until that Christmas morning. when she received her mother's text. Christmas dinner is cancelled due to the ice storm. Stay safe, honey. Not until she saw the Instagram post of her entire family gathered around Jessica's dining table, laughing and celebrating. Not until she realized that the ice storm had been a lie. That was the moment the illusion shattered. How many other times had they lied? How many other events had they secretly held without her? Had they ever truly wanted her there at all? For years, Emily had convinced herself that she was imagining things, that she was simply being too sensitive. But the truth was undeniable now. She was never a real part of their world. She had been an outsider from the start. Emily sat frozen, staring at the documents spread before her. Her hands trembled as she flipped through bank statements, legal paperwork, and property records, all of it pointing to a truth more painful than she could have imagined. Her parents had stolen from her. For years, she had worked tirelessly, struggling to make ends meet while unknowingly being robbed of what was rightfully hers. The inheritance her grandfather had left specifically for her education and future, nearly $300, had been secretly funneled into Jessica's lifestyle. Her father, as the trustee of the inheritance, had been responsible for ensuring that the money was used according to their grandfather's wishes. Instead, he had transferred it to Jessica's accounts, labeling it as family investments, investments that had funded her sister's extravagant lifestyle, her failed business ventures, and her numerous yoga retreats in Bali. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process it all. All those years she had worked overtime to pay for her accounting degree, racking up student loan debt, when the money to cover it had been sitting in a bank account she never even knew existed. All those times her parents had praised Jessica for pursuing her passions, while subtly criticizing Emily for always being stressed about money. They had watched her struggle, and they had said nothing. Her mother's words from their last conversation echoed in her mind. Jessica puts in the effort to be part of the family. You're always so busy with work. Busy with work. She had been working to survive while they had been funding Jessica's vacations. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. But it didn't stop there. Buried within the documents was something even worse, a legal form she had signed when she was 18. Believing it was just a medical power of attorney. In reality, it had granted her parents control over her financial interests, allowing them to sell off property left to her and Jessica by their grandfather. Property that should have been equally divided. Property that had all been sold, with every dollar going into Jessica's name. Emily's stomach turned as she thought about all the times she had helped her parents financially. The months she had chipped in to help them with their mortgage. The times she had covered expensive medical bills for them, assuming they were struggling. The moments she had cut back on her own expenses so that she could send them extra money whenever they asked. All while they had been sitting on money that belonged to her. She felt sick. Her father had stolen from her. Her mother had covered it up. Jessica had spent it without a second thought. And none of them had ever felt a shred of guilt. She clenched her fists, her entire body shaking with a mix of fury and grief. How could they do this? How could they lie to her face for years and pretend to love her while stealing from her? She had given them everything. Her time, her effort, her money, and they had repaid her by robbing her blind. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. She was an accountant. She understood financial fraud. And this? This was more than just betrayal. This was a crime. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Sarah, she said when her lawyer answered. Yes, Emily? I need to know exactly what legal options I have. She could almost hear Sarah sit up straighter on the other end of the line. Tell me everything, her lawyer said. Emily glanced at the documents again, her anger hardening into something cold and resolute. She had spent her entire life trying to earn her parents' love. But now? She was done. This time, she wasn't going to fight for their approval. She was going to fight for justice. Emily sat at her dining table, her fingers drumming against the thick folder of documents before her. The weight of betrayal still hung heavy in her chest. But now it was accompanied by something sharper. Something colder, determination. For years, she had been overlooked, dismissed, and lied to. But this time, she held the evidence in her hands. And for the first time in her life, She had the power. She had given her parents and Jessica one last chance, a final opportunity to come clean. To admit what they had done. And to make it right. But instead of remorse, they had chosen arrogance. You're being dramatic, Emily. It was just family money. Why are you acting like this is such a big deal? Jessica needed the support. You always had a good job. You didn't really need the money. Her father's words still echoed in her mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. Didn't need the money? She had spent years working herself to exhaustion, taking on extra shifts, sacrificing vacations, and living frugally just to stay afloat, all while they had been funding Jessica's lavish lifestyle behind her back. And now, they wanted to dismiss it like it was nothing? No, she wasn't letting them get away with it. She pulled out her phone and dialed her lawyer. Sarah, they're not going to cooperate, Emily said, her voice steady. I'm ready to move forward. Sarah didn't hesitate. I've already prepared the filings. We'll move forward with legal action immediately. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment, then exhaled. It was time. The day of the confrontation arrived, and Emily sat in her lawyer's office, a folder of evidence in front of her. Across the table sat her parents and Jessica, looking tense, irritated. They had expected a conversation, a family discussion. They had no idea what was coming. Sarah leaned forward, setting down the legal papers with a quiet but firm thud. Let's be clear about what's happening here, Sarah began. We have documented financial fraud, unauthorized use of funds, and power of attorney abuse. Emily has every legal right to pursue criminal charges. This is your one chance to make it right. Her mother scoffed. This is ridiculous. Emily, you're seriously threatening your own family over money? Emily met her mother's gaze. Unwavering. You stole from me. You used my inheritance to fund Jessica's life while I worked myself to exhaustion. This isn't just about money. This is about years of betrayal. Jessica crossed her arms, her face twisted with indignation. I didn't even know where the money came from. I thought Mom and Dad were just helping me out. Emily slammed a document down in front of her, then explained the multiple transfers labeled Jessica's business fund. You knew exactly what you were receiving. Jessica paled, but her mother stepped in again, her voice hardening. We're family. You're making a mistake, Emily. Emily let out a sharp, humorless laugh. No, the mistake was believing you ever valued me the way you valued Jessica. She turned to her father, her voice ice cold. You were the trustee of my inheritance. That was my money, and you stole it, and unless you return every cent, I will see you in court. Her father's face turned red. You wouldn't dare. Emily slid a court summons across the table. I already did. Silence. For the first time, real fear flickered across their faces. Her mother's jaw clenched. Jessica's lip trembled, and her father's hands curled into fists. They had spent years believing she would never stand up for herself. They were wrong. You have 48 hours, Sarah said. Return the money, sign the confession, and agree to restitution, or we proceed with formal charges. Jessica looked at their parents in desperation. Mom? Dad? We can't let this happen. Her father swallowed hard, his confidence crumbling. He knew the law wasn't on his side. He knew Emily wasn't bluffing. But his pride still held him back. Think about what this will do to the family. He tried one last time. Do you really want to destroy everything? Emily stood, gathering her things. You destroyed it, she said. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. As she walked out of the office, she felt lighter than she had in years. They had stolen from her. But now, she was taking back what was hers. Emily sat in her new office, the soft hum of conversation from her employees filling the space around her. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the sleek, modern desk where she worked. She glanced at the framed document on the wall, her business license for the consulting firm she had started just 6 months ago. It had been a year since she had walked away from her family. A year since she had stopped waiting for their approval and started living for herself. And yet, even now, there were moments when the weight of the past tried to creep back in. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She hesitated before picking it up, already knowing who it was. Mom. Emily. It's been too long. Can we talk? She stared at the message for a long time, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. It was strange how time had changed things. There had been a time when she would have dropped everything at the smallest hint of reconciliation. A time when she would have convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. But she knew better now. She placed the phone back down without responding. Looking back, Emily could hardly believe how much her life had changed. In the weeks following her legal battle with her parents, she had gone through a whirlwind of emotions. At first, there had been anger, raw and overwhelming. She had spent years trying to be the good daughter, the responsible one, the person who always did what was expected. And what had that gotten her? A stolen inheritance, years of financial struggle, and a family that had never truly valued her. Then, there had been grief, not for what she had lost, but for what had never been. She had mourned the idea of the family she had spent her whole life chasing, realizing that it had only ever existed in her head. But after the anger and grief, something else had settled in. Peace. For the first time in her life, she was free. No more being the afterthought. No more being the family's backup plan. No more waiting for love that would never come. She had taken the settlement money from her lawsuit against her parents and used it to wipe out her student loans, debts she never should have had in the first place. Then, she had taken the rest and invested it into herself. Something she had never allowed herself to do before. A business, a new home, a fresh start. She had left the city she had spent her whole life in, moving to a place where no one knew her as Jessica's less interesting sister, or the responsible one, or the girl who was always working. Here, she was just Emily, and that was enough. One afternoon, she was in a meeting when her assistant knocked on the door. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you." Emily frowned. "I don't have any appointments." Her assistant hesitated. "It's Jessica." A cold, familiar weight settled in Emily's chest. She hadn't spoken to her sister in over a year. "Send her in," she said, her voice steady. A few moments later, Jessica walked in, looking nothing like the sister Emily remembered. Gone was the polished, effortlessly put-together woman who had always been the center of attention. Instead, she looked tired, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her hands as though it was the only thing holding her together. "Wow," Jessica murmured, glancing around the office. "This is impressive." Emily said nothing, waiting. Jessica sighed, sitting down across from her. I don't know where to start." "Try the beginning," Emily said, her tone unreadable. Jessica swallowed, looking down. "Things have been hard. After everything that happened, Mom and Dad blamed me. They said I should have convinced you to let it go. They shut me out after they lost the case. Dad can't find work, and Mom refuses to leave the house." Emily nodded, unsurprised. Their parents had spent years pretending they were untouchable. Losing everything had probably shattered them. "And you?" she asked. Jessica hesitated. "I lost the studio. The settlement took most of my savings. I tried to start over. But I don't know how. I've never had to do it alone before." Emily leaned back in her chair. "And what do you want from me?" Jessica flinched. "I don't know. I miss you." A long silence stretched between them. A year ago, those words would have broken her. Now, she felt nothing but clarity. "You don't miss me," Emily said quietly. "You miss what I used to do for you." Jessica's eyes welled with tears. "That's not true." "It is." Emily cut her off. "You never saw me, Jessica. None of you did. I spent my entire life trying to be good enough for a family that only cared about me when they needed something. And now that I'm not playing that role anymore, you suddenly want me back." Jessica wiped at her eyes. "I'm trying, Emily." Emily studied her for a long moment. Maybe she was. But that wasn't Emily's burden to carry anymore. "I hope you figure it out," Emily said softly. Jessica opened her mouth as if to say more but seemed to think better of it. "Take care, Emily," she whispered before standing and walking out the door. Emily sat there for a long time, staring at the empty seat across from her. Then, she exhaled. Her sister was lost, just like their parents. And Emily? She had finally found herself. That night, she walked through her quiet apartment, the city skyline stretching out before her. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And for the first time, that was enough. Emily's story is a testament to resilience, self-worth, and the power of breaking free from toxic cycles. For years, she believed that love had to be earned through sacrifice. That family meant enduring mistreatment in silence. But in the end, she learned one of life's most valuable lessons. Real love doesn't require proving your worth. It sees your value without question. Her journey wasn't just about reclaiming her stolen inheritance, it was about reclaiming herself. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She stopped chasing validation from those who never truly valued her and built a life where she was no longer defined by others' expectations. Instead of holding on to bitterness, she chose freedom. Instead of seeking revenge, she built success on her own terms. Emily's story is for anyone who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unappreciated. It's a reminder that sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away from what is hurting you and invest in the life you deserve. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more empowering content. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories that remind us all, we're worth more than what we've been given. Emily's story is a testament to resilience, self-worth, and the power of breaking free from toxic cycles. For years, she believed that love had to be earned through sacrifice. That family meant enduring mistreatment in silence. But in the end, she learned one of life's most valuable lessons. Real love doesn't require proving your worth. It sees your value without question. Her journey wasn't just about reclaiming her stolen inheritance, it was about reclaiming herself. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She stopped chasing validation from those who never truly valued her and built a life where she was no longer defined by others' expectations. Instead of holding on to bitterness, she chose freedom. Instead of seeking revenge, she built success on her own terms. Emily's story is for anyone who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unappreciated. It's a reminder that sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away from what is hurting you and invest in the life you deserve. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more empowering content. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories that remind us all, we're worth more than what we've been given.